Hello, welcome to NextGEN Medium Podcast. This first episode is all about me. You want to know who I am? You want to know who's giving you this stuff about psychic abilities, mediumship abilities, intuitive abilities? These are soul abilities, and I've gone through my own journey of this stuff a couple years in, but I was so astounded by how I came across this and what I've grown to know, what has become my truth, that I had to share this with the world. And what is most important, why I do this whole thing, is because I believe these aren't special abilities. I believe these are all part of your toolbox too. I think just being a human being, you have a birthright into these soul abilities. So that's sort of my general kind of intro information to get you started on what NextGEN Medium is all about. Now, before I get into my big long-winded story, this is what I want you to know. I have discovered my psychic intuitive abilities. I discovered them a couple years ago. I did a one-day introduction to medium course. I think there were things that happened during that class that made me wonder, am I psychic? Am I a medium? Do I have these abilities? Is this mine? Have I had these the whole time? I was 33 when I took this class. 33 years of not knowing that I could tap into these abilities on my own. 3 years ago, I would not know that I had psychic intuitive mediumship abilities. Now, I do. At that time, I was open to the possibility. I crossed that threshold. I've tested my abilities. I've had experiences that have aided the understanding of truth for me, creating new truth, new priorities, new understanding, connected with my purpose, understanding my skills. I've also evolved in understanding the self-imposed limits that I put on myself and that I still grapple with a couple years later, even though I'm able to connect with that stuff. Like, there's still Sarah. Sarah's still here. It's just Sarah has a different understanding of how things work. Crossing this threshold, I've gained security in controlling my path. Hearing these things that have come as a result of uncovering my abilities, a truth, a purpose, understanding of my limits, knowing possibility, feeling in control of my path, these are things I want to bring to you, to your life, because they've been so impactful in mine. I want there to be little parallels that you can identify with. And maybe the biggest parallel is living your life so far not knowing of your abilities. And so I want to tell you my story so you can maybe have those parallels with my story. And so you can feel there's a resonance between you and I. And that way you can gain a little bit of trust in where I come from and my understanding. Here we go. Okay, a little bit about me so you can understand who I am and who's giving you information about this kind of stuff. So I grew up in New England in a little Maine town on the Penobscot River called Winterport. That's where I went to school and had school friends. And my mom and dad raised me. They never married, so kind of an unusual situation there. Did the best they could raising me and my brother, and also some step parents in the mix as well. Did not grow up religious, but growing up, I was a pretty oblivious child, and I think that kind of talks volumes about the kind of childhood I had, where I was just living unconsciously as a child and just doing my child things and being happy and exploring and being curious. I remember the first job first career I ever wanted to do was be a paleontologist. Except I didn't know the word paleontologist. It was, I want to be a scientist, the dinosaur kind. And I think this was around the time that Jurassic Park came out, so I must have been kind of influenced by that. Side note, That's my furnace, and you will hear that co-host on occasion just rambling in the background. I'm so tired of trying to avoid recording when that's going to happen, but this is the time of year when the furnace is going to go crazy. So, where was I? Oblivious child. There did come a point when I hit puberty and I turned very consciously aware, very inward, very artistic, but also growing up in a small town, and we moved around a little bit, so it's not like I had neighborhood friends because I moved around quite a bit, kind of ended up in a place where we lived far from people, so it's not like I could just walk down the road to go see my best friend. I think that was part of my exploration in the depths of understanding me and becoming more consciously aware of adult things, concepts, great music. So I became more artistic and learned to play instruments, taught myself how to play instruments, and just really spent a lot of time being creative, using my mind and using my focus to create beautiful things. Around puberty, I started having some digestion issues, which was really hard for me to deal with as a teenager. Dealing with digestion issues, it was just really embarrassing to deal with. So I think that was another thing that aided in wanting to be away from people, to turn inward. Now, when it comes to my psychic, intuitive, mediumship journey, I would say my coming of age was the first time I remember something paranormal that happened. I say it like this because I think it's kind of important, the timing of things. So it was a week before 7th grade started, and it was around that time that I was into dreams and stuff. And so I was journaling my dreams, and I had a dream where my mom was modeling these unusual red pants. And I wrote it down in my dream book. 2 days later was the start of my first period ever. Like, first day of my first period. It was hot. It was like August, the week before school started. My mom came home and she had some shopping bags with her. She was not the kind of person to go shopping. She did not have the patience to go shopping, so it's kind of unusual to see some shopping bags. But she went in the other room. She came back out and she had on those pair of pants that I had in my dream. Now, these pair of pants were very unusual. They were wide-legged. They were burgundy red. They had the cording like corduroy, but it was a stretchy fabric, loose and thin compared to like corduroy fabric. It was just like in my dream, and there she was modeling them. That was the first time I ever had the hint of my psychic abilities. I look back on it now and I'm able to say that I had a premonitional dream. At that time, it was, oh my God, I dreamed those pants, that you wore those pants and you're doing exactly what was in my dream. That was like the first memory that I can recall of a paranormal experience. That's something that I always remember. And now I can look back on and have a timeline of when did things kind of start, you know, when it came to being aware of unusual abilities. At least that's what we would say in our society. That's weird. But now, as I know now, these are normal. It's just they're perceived as unusual. So that was like my first experience coming of age and having a psychic dream. From there, throughout being a teenager, I was going through a lot of stuff with identity and going through also like physical problems with my body. So I just turned inward a lot, but I still wanted to achieve things that a kid wants to achieve. And a lot of it had to do with, you know, what's expected of following your path. So you're expected to graduate high school, go to college, get your job, find the person you're going to marry them, have kids. Like, that's the checklist, right? So after high school, I went to college. That was a bit of a meander of trying to figure out where I was going to go. Throughout college, I kept doing music. I was really interested in performing and eventually started doing that solo and in bands. I also kept doing my art. I even did some shows here and there in the area. That stuff was important to me. I was proud of that stuff. So throughout college, I pretty much kept that intrinsic inward depth and kept reaching further in there. And then life comes along. Those things you don't expect to happen, that happened in my last year of college. I ended up getting pregnant, and me and my boyfriend had only been together for a few months, so it was like, hey, what do we do? I am a believer in choice, that everybody has a choice when it comes to a pregnancy. Here I was, 21 years old, still in college, no money, but when I got pregnant, it was, I'm going to take on this responsibility, because if I don't take on this responsibility, then who am I, if I don't take this responsibility on? So me and my boyfriend at the time, we were like, okay, we're going to go through with this and we're going to be parents. We'll see how the relationship goes. Luckily for he and I, we're actually a pretty good match. So we ended up getting married. Not too long after baby Vera was born, and I graduated with an infant in my arms. My plans to go be a music producer were not going to happen at that time, so I ended up wanting to do something I really wanted to do. I still wanted to do a job that was fun and artistic, and so I became a tattoo artist. I got licensed and quickly learned that wasn't going to work out, so I actually became a phlebotomist after that and started working for the Red Cross. That's where my life started meandering into medical fields and trying to get where I can with the education I had, with the work experience I had, and eventually we had another child, Lucy. During that time, started working at a hospital as a medical assistant and working my way through trying to figure out where I belonged in there. And then I actually ended up working at a gastroenterology office, which was exactly what I needed, because I was still going through stomach problems from the start of puberty to that point, my mid-20s. I had stomach issues the whole time, and I just could not figure out what was happening, why it was happening. Is there something wrong with my body? Is there what's wrong? I just could not figure it out. And after a couple of years of working at this gastroenterology office, one of the providers, a nurse practitioner, Barbara Marzoff, she is an angel of mine, she gave me a book. And it was that book that solved my problem. And it was the foods I was digesting that did not help. And shout out to FODMAP, FODMAP. I think if you live in Australia, that may be more of a word or phrase that is familiar to you. But this FODMAP concept has changed my life. And really, I think once my body was able to heal and I was able to feel normal, feel like I was in control of my body. This very basic necessity is your body. What is it that's out of whack? I can't figure it out. Once I figured it out, then it was like a whole new lease on life. From there, I started feeling more ambitious and more courageous, because it was like I had a whole new body, I could have control over what was happening. It was through that I think I started experiencing my energy going through my body instead of being so caught up with this turmoil of my body not working right. I feel like I look back on this now, and this is how I kind of look at it. My energy got to the point where it was flowing so freely like it never had before. And maybe with so much concentration that was not impeded, that I think my body just couldn't deal with it. And so it was around that time, after fixing my body by figuring out what foods I shouldn't be consuming, I started getting high anxiety I didn't really know how to deal with that either. So it's like I cured my body of its problem, and now it's felt like, my brain is going crazy. That was the start of a new journey, is the mental health stuff. I kind of went through more jobs. I actually got a job in radio where, here I am years later, still in radio because of the opportunities someone passed along to me. Having to go through anxiety and trying to figure out how to deal with high anxiety where I feel out of control. It's funny that I went through that because it's something that actually came back, and it had to do with my spiritual awakening. All right, this is a huge long story, but there's a lot of things in here that could parallel what you're going through or what you have gone through. I just want to be able to have a connection with you where you feel like a part of what I have to say is a part of your story, because that's what I can do to bring you into this. If that's how I catch you, if that's how you resonate with me, then it's just a way for me to gain your attention, for you to be aware that these little things that we experience together, there's a bigger parallel. You know what I mean? But anyway, let me get into the spiritual awakening here. So a few years ago, I finally got a job where I felt like, okay, I can be comfortable in this. I had another child, Jack. So that's 3 kids, all right, putting it all together. I also felt like I was more in control of my anxiety stuff. So here I was feeling great with my body, and it functioning well for me, and feeling a little more in control of my anxiety, depression stuff. But it's funny because that's going to come back in just a second. What was it that triggered my spiritual awakening? My spiritual awakening was triggered by an opportunity. There was a place that I would go to starting when I was maybe 19 or so, a spiritual church here in the Bangor area. They do mediumship galleries where you're welcome to come join and be part of the audience, and they have 1 or 2 mediums that go through and do a 10-minute reading on each person that comes to be part of the audience. And so for years I've done that, maybe 1 or 2 a year. And I go in and I just wasn't sure, is this real or is this not real? There came a point when I felt like I was getting information that felt like it was beyond a guess, And so that's why I kind of kept coming back, but I never came with full 100% trust in what was happening. Once I crossed that threshold and had my spiritual awakening, a lot of things that happened during those readings, a lot of the truths I now know are reflected in those experiences. It's really interesting. But I saw that this spiritual church had a mediumship development course, like a 1-day, 6-hour course that they were offering. And here I was a year after my last child was born, and I got a new job, and I'm feeling pretty comfortable. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to go do this. Of course, the day of, I was like, why did I sign up for this? I don't want to do this. I don't know. But I went and I did it. Within the first hour, I was using parts of my brain that I never really focused on before. I've been to those places in my brain, but not in the way that I was being guided through. Within an hour, I felt like I tapped into something that was incredible. Throughout this development class that was being hosted by Melissa Gabriel, she did guided meditations. We did experiments of doing a sitting reading for people that were there also doing development. I didn't know any of these people, so it was great to be able to work off of people you have no clue who they are. Let's just say I walked away from this 6-hour course and my whole world changed when I walked out that door. My energy was palpable. I just had this feeling that everything was going to be different. The next day I had a wicked headache. It was terrible. And that night sleeping was just, I had some weird experiences that I never experienced, and I didn't know really what to make of them. A couple days after having that development course, I felt high anxiety again. Now, the last time I felt this high anxiety was after I felt my body had been cured of its problems, and the energy that was flowing through me was not impeded, and it was flowing in a way it could never have before. And so looking back, this is how I can describe it, because this resurgence of high anxiety, already taking anxiety medication because of the first time I started having this high anxiety crap, it was sort of like, what is happening? I feel like I have so much energy and I want to just crawl out of my skin. I felt out of control. So I ended up contacting Melissa, the lady who hosted the mediumship class. And I said, Melissa, I feel like I'm going to explode with energy. Is this normal? What do I do? And so, Melissa, thank you so much for your words, because she said, this is what you need to do. All right. You got a lot going on right now. Stuff is brand new going through you with the experience you had. And this happens. So that made me feel better. And then next she said, you need to do some meditation. I was like, are you kidding me? Okay. Like, I'm desperate. I will do meditation. So I did meditation 5 times a day for like 10 minutes each time. 5 times a day for like the next 4 days. And I shit you not. By day 5, it was almost like I didn't have any anxiety stuff whatsoever. And I look back and I go, oh my God. I could have avoided using anxiety medication if I just knew the tool that I had of my own. And I wouldn't be dealing with having to taper or having to switch or dealing with side effects or blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, during this second high anxiety phase, I'm taking anxiety medication already. I'd been doing it for years because of that first time dealing with the high anxiety. So once my anxiety came down and I was able to control that, that's when I felt the dawning of my spiritual awakening. I do believe it started with the anxiety, but when people talk about their spiritual awakening, they talk about this romance. It really is feeling in love with the world, seeing the world differently, feeling it differently. One of my big kind of weird experiences being in my spiritual awakening, which went on for weeks, maybe months, was this feeling of wanting to open my cranium, my skull, and expose my brain to the sky. Like, that is the weirdest shit you've ever heard, but that's how I describe it. I felt like the sky was so much closer than it ever had been before, and it was right there. And it sounds so weird to say, because if you haven't gone through it, it sounds like, what kind of drugs were you taking? But I didn't take drugs. In fact, I've smoked weed a couple times, and both times, few times, it was like, I hate this. I hate smoking weed. I hate how I feel with it. After that spiritual awakening, it was sort of like, oh my God, what does this mean for my abilities? What are the possibilities? And so I started really getting into doing meditation and really tapping into the psychic, soul, mediumship, intuitive abilities. And it was through my experimentation, reading stuff, attending workshops and development classes. It was through that stuff that I gained slowly a new truth that this stuff was mine to have. And so then there came a point of having to accept that this was reality. And it was really hard. It was not easy. The hardest part was wanting to experiment with it, which means having to work with people, which means having to tell people what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. That was the hardest part for me, was telling other people, hey, I might be a psychic medium intuitive. I think my ego had a really hard time. I sat on a Facebook post for 2 weeks This Facebook post was supposed to be like a, hey, just want to see if anybody's interested in sitting with me so I can do a reading on you. And this Facebook post would be seen by family and friends and old coworkers, new coworkers, old bosses, all these people whose opinions mean a lot to me. And here I am sitting on this Facebook post like, am I going to publish this? Am I not going to publish? I knew I was going to publish it, but it was sort of like, I just need to get that courage to say, fuck it, like, fuck it. I just got to do it. And so I did it. And that was the hardest part. And it was sort of like, oh, cringy, like, oh, what are people thinking? Do they think that I think I'm special? Do they think I'm delusional? Do they think I'm crazy? But in the end, it was sort of like, I have no control over what people think, but I know what I got to figure out. And I got to figure out if this stuff is true, if this is stuff that I can actually do. And then once I became comfortable with the idea that, you know what, I can do this stuff, then there was another big hurdle. And that was, well, what do I do now? What am I going to do? Readings? What is my purpose? And that's when NextGEN Medium came about. That's why you're here right now and why I'm talking to you. I wanted to bring this awareness, my story of being 33 years old, having a spiritual awakening because of one development course. And really, it was the first 2 hours of that development course that just blew my mind and I think sparked this whole spiritual awakening, this whole higher consciousness world that I live every day and that I feel so motivated to tell you about. Because I cannot be alone in this. There's other people out there. And honestly, I do truly believe intuition, that soul ability is available to all of us. And those other soul abilities, psychic, mediumship, healing, I think these are abilities that you can explore. And whether it's yours or not, that's what you got to figure out in your journey. So I think it's open. It's open. The possibilities are open for you. It's whether you want to get on the path of figuring that stuff out. NextGEN Medium. I want to be the resource that you can go to for your development. To be realistic about the experience, I'm a few years in. There's a lot of stuff I've come across that I don't see online. I want to bring that honest perspective, that realistic perspective when it comes to like incense and crystals and stuff like that. I'm not going to discount that stuff, but at the same time, like, that's the fluff. I don't want to do the fluff. We're not talking about materials. We're talking about your tools that you have that don't cost a thing, but there is investments that you need to make for those who want to take on that soul journey. So wherever you are starting out, if you haven't quite made it to the thresholds, if you've crossed the thresholds, if you're already in this new world, but kind of wandering around, not sure what to do, these are places that I can help you with because I've been there and give you my experience, my perspective, my truth. And like I said, you're going to develop your own. This is not religion. This is spirituality. This is you developing your own truth. I think there's some commonalities we're going to have, you and I, when it comes to our development. But I think there's a common good that we all serve. And we're all going to find our way of figuring that out. And it's going to take our partnership, you and I. Okay, so there's the first episode of NextGEN Medium, the podcast. You can find more episodes at nextgenmedium.com. You could also like me on Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram. And if you yourself want a helping hand with your guidance, you can schedule a development session by going to my website, nextgenmedium.com. You can even flip through my calendar and see what day and time works best for you. And if you want a reading, we can do that too. Check out nextgenmedium.com for more development stuff. And I'll chat with you again in the next episode. See you, bye.